All right, let's get into a story that, honestly, it just redefines what it means to be a survivor. It's a story that starts with an act of almost unimaginable brutality, but I promise you, it ends with this incredible testament to the power of the will to live.
Let's start with a number, just 37. That's how many times Alison Botha was stabbed in her abdomen. And we're not just talking about stabs. They literally disemboweled her, leaving her organs exposed to the night air. And then, there's another number, 17. That's how many times they slashed her throat. I mean, so deeply that her head was almost completely severed. They left her for dead. But here's the thing, they were wrong.
So let's go back in time. We're in Port Elizabeth, South Africa. It's December 1994, and we meet Alison Botha. She's 27, working as an insurance broker, and by all accounts, just living a really happy, normal life. You know, surrounded by people she loved.
The night this all happened, it started out so completely normal. She'd been to the beach, hung out with friends. Around 1 in the morning, she does what any of us would do for a friend. She offers to give them a ride home. And it was on her way back that her entire world just completely shattered.
So she parks a car, and suddenly her door is just ripped open. There's a man there with a knife. He forces his way in, tells her his name is Clinton, and that all he wants is the car. Then he picks up his buddy, and they drive her way, way out to this desolate spot on the edge of the city. So who were these guys? Frans Toit and Theuns Kruger. Toit, he already had a rap sheet for violent attacks on women. And Kruger, he grew up in a violent home and had this deep, twisted hatred for women. You know, these were two guys who felt rejected by the world, and they bonded over this shared darkness and an attraction to Satanism, which made them an absolutely terrifying pair.
Out there in the middle of nowhere, in the dark, any pretense that this was just a carjacking, it just completely disappeared. What happened next wasn't just a crime. It was pure, calculated cruelty that pushed Alison to the absolute edge of life.
After they brutally assaulted her, they made a decision. A really cold, calculated one. They had to kill her, right? They couldn't risk leaving a living witness. They actually tried to strangle her first, and when that didn't work, they pulled out the knife again.
And this is in Alison's own words, which is just chilling. She remembers seeing, not feeling pain, but hearing a horrifyingly wet sound as he was cutting her throat. She said it wasn't a dream. She knew it was real.
As they were getting ready to leave, one of them actually asked the other, "Is she dead yet?" And the reply was just, "No one could survive this." So they just drove off in her car, completely confident that they'd gotten away with murder, leaving her body behind.
But here's where they were so wrong. This is the moment the story completely flips. It goes from absolute horror to this almost unbelievable story of human will. Because miraculously, Alison was still breathing, and some primal instinct to live just roared to life.
Lying there, thinking she was about to die, her very first conscious act wasn't to give up. It was an act of both justice and love. With her finger, she wrote their names in the dirt, Frans and Theuns. And then she wrote, "I love you, Mom." What she did next is just, it's hard to even comprehend. She sees headlights way off in the distance and knows she has to get to that road. With her organs literally spilling out, she grabs her shirt to hold them in. When she forces herself to stand up, her head just flops backward because her neck muscles are completely severed. So, get this. She uses one hand to hold her organs in and the other to hold her own head upright, and she starts to walk. She finally collapses on the white line in the middle of the road. One car actually slows down, sees her, and then just speeds off, terrified. But then another car stops. The driver was a veterinary student named Toit. He runs to her, and using what he knows about medicine, he gives her first aid until help arrives. He later said he felt like God put him on that road for a reason that night. The doctors who worked on her basically said her survival was one medical miracle after another. The knife somehow missed every single major artery and vital organ. Because she hadn't eaten, she didn't get deadly sepsis from her stomach wounds. And maybe the most incredible part? The huge gash in her neck actually severed her windpipe, creating a new opening for her to breathe through, even as she was being strangled. But Alison's fight was far from over. I mean, her survival meant her attackers could actually face justice, and she was determined, even from her hospital bed, to make sure that happened.
She couldn't speak because of her throat injuries, but she didn't have to. The police brought her mugshots, and she pointed out Toit and Kruger. And then, to confirm it, the police did something brand new for South Africa at the time. They used a one-way mirror, so Alison could see them in a lineup, but they couldn't see her. And yeah, she knew it was them instantly.
This part is wild. When the police arrested Toit, he was so sure she was dead that he just assumed it was a murder investigation. The second he found out she was alive, he just crumbled. He confessed pretty quickly and even handed over one of her rings that he'd kept as a souvenir.
Things moved really fast after that. They were arrested the very next day. 6 months later, the trial starts, and by August of '95, they're both found guilty and get life in prison. But, that wasn't the end of it. Decades go by, the parole system in South Africa changes, and both men eventually became eligible for release. And in July 2023, they were paroled.
You have to hear what the judge said back in 1995. Judge Chris Jansen was so appalled by the sheer brutality of it all that he put it on the record, saying, "I need to state clearly, they are a threat to society and should never be released." Those words, they really hang in the air now, considering they're both free.
So the trial is over, but for Alison, the real journey was just starting. How do you even begin to reclaim a life that's been so horribly torn apart? Well, she did, and in the process, she became this incredible global symbol of hope.
After fighting through a really deep depression, Alison clawed her way back to life. She ended up marrying an old friend, and they had 2 sons, something doctors told her would probably be impossible. She wrote a best-selling book about her experience called I Have Life, and she became this world-famous motivational speaker, sharing her message of what it means to be resilient.
And what about Tion Ellard, the young man who saved her? Well, that night completely changed his life's path too. He realized he was meant to save people, so he switched from veterinary medicine to become a human doctor. And to this day, he and Alison are still very close friends.
And that brings us right up to today. Alison Botha survived something that no one should have survived, and she built this incredible life dedicated to lifting others up. Meanwhile, her attackers, the same men a judge called a permanent threat to society, are now free. And that leaves us with a really tough question, doesn't it? What does justice really look like in a case like